If you're just getting into crafting in Final Fantasy XIV, there's a lot to learn about. I've been crafting since release way back in 2013, so I've picked up a lot of helpful information along the way that I hope will make your crafting journey smoother. I have some other crafting guides in the works, but before I really get into the meat of things in those videos, I wanted to first discuss some information about vendors who carry crafting materials. It's helpful to know where certain vendors are and understanding the differences of wares between all of them. There's so many different types of crafting material vendors, and they're scattered all around in various areas, making it a little tricky to catch on to. We're not going to discuss every single crafting material vendor, as there is a lot of them. I want to show you the vendors that you'll most often be obtaining basic materials from for your crafts. The most important thing to remember is that when you scroll over an item, if it's sold from a vendor, it will have a shop selling price listed. If the item cannot be obtained from a vendor, the shop selling price will say none. Unfortunately, in-game, there's no way to tell specifically which vendor sells those items. You'll eventually start to remember which vendors sell what from experience, but as a beginner, I highly recommend using a search engine to look up which vendors sell that material. To help split up this guide, I have timestamps in the description of this video. Before we start discussing vendors, since we're talking a lot about crafting materials today, I want to mention a few features that are helpful for figuring out which crafting materials you need. A nifty new feature added in 5.3 allows you to right-click on an item and select Search Recipes using this material.
Please note, Kupo, that the item needs to be in yours or your retainer's inventory. It does not work on a vendor menu or your crafting log.
This will allow you to see which recipe a certain material is used in. Seeing how often you might be needing a particular material will give you a good idea on which materials you'll want to craft bulk of. For example, I know that cotton yarn is used in a lot of recipes, so when you look through the recipe list, you'll see that a lot of weaver recipes require cotton yarn. The next feature is really useful to use when you're in the crafting log. You can right-click on the required material and select Search for Item by Crafting Method. This quickly takes you to the recipe required to make that material. A lot of recipes require other crafted items. I personally use this feature all the time. There's also a feature from the crafting log where you can click on a recipe and select Recipe Tree or Raw Materials List. The Raw Materials List gives a nice simple breakdown of all of the materials you need. You can also adjust the quantity. The Recipe Tree gives more of a visual breakdown. For example, let's take a look at the Initiate's Gown recipe. Bringing up both the recipe tree and the raw material list is helpful in learning the crafting process. We can then combine the features we learned to see which materials you can just get from a vendor by scrolling over them and seeing if they have a shop selling price. We can see that the cotton bowl and the iron ore can just be purchased from a vendor, whereas the diorite web is not sold from a vendor. But I'll talk more in depth about non-vendor items in an upcoming crafter video, as we are only focusing on vendor materials in this one. Now that we've seen all of the helpful features that show us which materials are from vendors, we need to talk about where these vendors are located. The first two vendors that I'm going to discuss are the ones that I personally use the most, even to this day as a max level crafter. There's a lot of crafting recipes, including high level recipes that require lower level materials. If you're ever crafting leather boots, even at high levels, you're always going to need rubber, which is a low level material. When you need your rubber though, the vendors have you covered. Both of these vendors are from Housing Features, but don't worry. Before you run away from me, you do not need to own a private house to access these vendors. Let's first discuss the Housing District Material Supplier. If you don't own a house, you can quickly teleport to any of the housing districts through the main Aetherytes in their related cities. You do need to do quests to access these teleports. Don't worry, they are quick and painless. Just search through an internet browser for a quest called Where the Heart Is. You'll see a quest for the Goblet, Mist, and the Lavender Beds. You can complete all 3 to unlock teleports in Oda, Limsa, and Gridania. The quest to unlock Shirogane teleports from Kugane is called I Dream of Shirogane. The Housing District material suppliers are located in each of the housing districts. They sell a few crafting materials along with other various random things. I don't use this vendor too much as they don't sell as many items as the next vendor that I'm about to mention. So let's discuss the Housing Material Supplier. Once you can afford a free company room or an apartment, both costing 500,000 gil, you should consider buying a housing material supplier. Or if you're a part of a free company that has a house, it's likely that they already have a material supplier placed inside the free company house. If they don't, you should slap them. The player housing material supplier sells lumber, stone, bone, leather, cloth, reagents, and cooking ingredients. Most of these are low-level recipe items from about level 1 to 15, and they're very cheap to purchase. This vendor sells the most materials out of all the vendors we're going to discuss today. This is the merchant that I personally use the most. If you're wondering where you get this material supplier for housing, each housing district has a vendor called an independent soldier. Then you can purchase a material supplier permit.
By the way, Kupo, there is 3 options which give you different appearances for your material supplier. It doesn't matter which one you purchase, Kupo.
Each major city has a merchant that sells a list of items. In Oda, Limsa, and Gridania, they are called tradecraft merchants. In Kugane and the Crystarium, they are called material suppliers. In the Foundation, they have the title Sundries Vendor. All of these vendors sell the same items for the same prices. However, the merchants in the expansion cities sell a few additional items. Since these vendors have different titles, to simplify things, we're going to refer to them as city merchants.
Please note, Kupo, that the main items that these vendors sell have some materials that overlap with the housing material and guild supplier merchants.
Let's discuss the additional items that the expansion vendors sell. In the Foundation, the Sundries vendor sells some commonly used Heavensward materials like Corthan tea leaves, Albalethian rock salt, and Dravanian and Albalethian mistletoe. Kugane material suppliers sell some cooking materials needed for Stormblood culinarian recipes, like cashew sticky rice, fish stock, Oriental soy sauce, Oriental miso paste, cooking sake, and nigiri. The only extra items our buddy Rail currently sells over in the Crystarium is yak milk. When the next expansion releases, we will probably see Rail get additional Shadowbringer materials added. In patch 5.3, Cilios now sells jewels which are mainly used in goldsmith recipes. Cilios is located in Oda, in the Steppes of Thal, not far away from the Goldsmith Guild. We're not going to specifically discuss custom deliveries in this video, but I do want to mention that in patch 5.3, 2 of the custom delivery supply vendors now sell some regular crafting materials. There is a scrap salvager in Idleshire that sells various Heavensward recipe materials. These items are located under the category Purchase Items 2. In Rhalgar's Reach, there is a material supplier that provides Stormblood recipe materials. These items are located under the category Purchase Items 2. It's important to note that since these materials are a higher level, they are really pricey. I don't recommend resorting to buying these items often. It will save you money to craft those items yourself instead. There's 2 really helpful websites for crafting materials that I'd like to mention that I use on a regular basis. The first is Gamer Escape. When I need to look up an item quickly and I'm just looking for where one material is located, or if I forgot which vendors sell a certain item, I usually use Gamer Escape. The second website that I use a lot is Teamcraft. When I'm doing larger scale crafting projects, like a set of gear, housing furniture, or free company projects, I always use Teamcraft. It gives a really nice breakdown of where materials come from, and you can also quickly click on things to see where the vendors or gathering nodes are located. If you're making something with a friend or a free company, you can all collaborate together by linking your Final Fantasy XIV account to your TeamCraft account.
If you enjoyed this crafting guide, please subscribe to Prambelina's channel, Kupo! There's more crafting guides on the way. See you next time, Kupo!